The observation deck of the Galactic Council's flagship Eternal Vigilance had never been so crowded. Representatives from 47 different species pressed against the reinforced viewing windows, their various forms of breathing apparatus fogging the transparent aluminum as they watched the impossible scene unfolding in the containment bay below. Ambassador Zefkara of the Vorthan Empire clutched his ceremonial staff with all four of his primary appendages, the bioluminescent patterns along his carapace flickering in distress. "This is madness," he whispered in the universal tongue, his translator struggling to convey the horror in his native clicking language. Absolute madness. The creature in the bay below was a living nightmare given form. Kirax's the destroyer stretched nearly 50 meters from snout to tail, his obsidian scales reflecting the harsh containment lights like a constellation of stars made from pure malevolence. Each of his 6 legs ended in claws that could slice through battleship hulls, and his 3 heads moved independently, each one housing a maw filled with teeth that dripped with neurotoxic saliva capable of dissolving most known metals. This was the dragon that had single-handedly devastated the Rigel colonies. The beast that had turned the pride of the Centaurian fleet into cosmic dust with nothing but his breath. The monster whose very name was whispered in the darkest corners of the galaxy as a curse upon one's enemies. And, standing directly in front of him, barely reaching the height of his smallest claw, was a human child. "How did we allow this situation to develop?" demanded General Vexthar, his reptilian features twisted in what his species considered extreme anxiety. The Saurian military commander had personally overseen 3 different evacuation protocols in his career, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Captain Sarah Mitchell of the Earth Defense Force stood at the back of the observation deck, her jaw set in a hard line that her fellow humans would recognize as barely controlled fury. She'd been arguing against this demonstration for weeks, but the Galactic Council had been insistent. Humanity wanted full membership? They would have to prove they belonged among the civilized species of the galaxy. "The Terran delegation assured us their representative would be able to handle first contact protocols," said Counselor Melvin, her gossamer wings beating frantically as she hovered near the ceiling. The ethereal's natural translucency had turned almost completely opaque with stress. They did not specify that their representative would be a juvenile. Below them, 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez adjusted her small backpack and took another step toward the dragon. She wore a simple yellow dress decorated with pictures of various earth animals, her dark hair pulled back in 2 neat braids tied with blue ribbons. In her right hand, she carried a wooden lunchbox painted with flowers, and, in her left, a small stuffed elephant she'd named Mr. Peanuts. The containment bay was large enough to house a small starship, its walls lined with energy dampeners and gravitational restraints that could hold a small moon in place. Emergency protocols were active on every level, with automated defense systems tracking the dragon's every movement, ready to flood the chamber with enough firepower to level a city at the first sign of aggression. None of this seemed to concern Emma in the slightest. "Someone needs to stop this immediately," hissed Ambassador Sulthara, the serpentine delegate's forked tongue tasting the air for traces of fear pheromones. What she found instead was something far more disturbing, the complete absence of any scent indicating distress from the human child. "The creature will kill her before our defense systems can react." Kiraxes had been in captivity for 3 standard galactic months, ever since the combined fleets of 12 different worlds had finally managed to subdue him using experimental quantum nets and neural disruptors. Even sedated and contained, he had killed 4 guards and injured dozens more. The sight of his massive form was enough to send most sentient beings into immediate fight or flight responses. Emma paused about 10 meters from the dragon's primary head and carefully set down her lunchbox. She opened it with the same methodical precision she used when preparing for a tea party with her stuffed animals back home, revealing a collection of items that seemed impossibly mundane given the circumstances: a peanut butter and jelly sandwich cut into neat triangles, a juice box, some apple slices in a small container, and what appeared to be a handful of colorful candies. "Is she preparing to eat?" asked Professor Quindell, the cerebral scientist's massive cranium pulsing with confusion. His species had evolved beyond the need for physical sustenance millennia ago, but he retained enough biological memory to recognize feeding behaviors. Captain Mitchell stepped forward, her hand moving instinctively toward the emergency communication device on her belt. "Emma," she called through the intercom system, her voice carefully controlled. "Remember what we talked about. Nice and slow, just like we practiced." The child looked up at the observation deck and waved cheerfully, as if she were greeting friends at a playground rather than addressing some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy while standing in mortal peril. Kirax's middle head turned toward Emma with the fluid grace of a predator focusing on prey. His eyes, each one larger than the child's entire torso, began to glow with an inner fire that had been the last thing countless victims had ever seen. The temperature in the containment bay began to rise as his internal combustion chambers started to activate. "Emergency protocols now," shouted General Vexthar, reaching for the manual override controls. "Wait." The voice belonged to High Counselor Thane Wyss, the eldest member of the Galactic Council and one of only 3 beings in known space who had survived a direct encounter with a void WIRM. The ancient being's crystalline form resonated with harmonics that conveyed absolute authority. "Let us observe." Emma seemed completely unaware of the rising tension in the observation deck. She selected one of the apple slices and held it up toward the dragon's primary head, the way she might offer a treat to a neighbor's dog. "Hello there," she said in her clear, high voice, the translation systems carrying her words to every species present in their native languages. "My name is Emma. I brought you some snacks because I thought you might be hungry. Being in a cage must be really boring." The dragon's 3 heads moved in perfect synchronization, focusing on the tiny figure before them. The glow in his eyes intensified, and small wisps of smoke began to curl from his nostrils. "This is exactly what our xenobiologists predicted," whispered Dr. Chen from the human delegation, his face pale but determined. "Kiraxes is a pack hunter by nature. His species recognizes dominance through size and aggressive displays. To him, Emma should represent the ultimate prey item." "Then, why isn't he attacking?" demanded Ambassador Zethkara. It was a question that none of them could answer. By every scientific model, every behavioral prediction, every tactical analysis, the dragon should have already incinerated the child. Instead, Kiraxes lowered his primary head until he was eye level with Emma, studying her with an intensity that seemed to transcend mere predatory interest. Emma took a small step forward, the apple slice still extended in offering. "I know you're probably not used to Earth food, but my mom always says that sharing makes everything better. She packed extra in case you wanted to try some." The observation deck fell into absolute silence. Even the ambient hum of the ship's life support systems seemed to fade away as every being present held their breath. Kiraxes opened his massive jaws, revealing rows of teeth, each one longer than Emma's arm. The child didn't flinch. Instead, she stood on her tiptoes and gently placed the apple slice on the dragon's tongue before stepping back with a satisfied smile. "There you go," she said, clapping her hands together. "Mom always says you should try new things. Do you like it?" The dragon's jaws closed slowly, almost delicately, as if he were afraid of making too much noise. For a moment that stretched into eternity, nothing happened. Then, Kiraxes swallowed, and something impossible occurred. The glow in his eyes softened, changing from the harsh fire of predatory hunger to something that looked almost like curiosity. His massive head tilted slightly to one side, studying the small human with an expression that none of the observers had ever seen on a dragon's features before. Emma beamed at him as if he had just performed the most wonderful trick in the world. She reached into her lunchbox again and pulled out her stuffed elephant, holding it up for the dragon to see. "This is Mr. Peanuts," she announced proudly. "He's my best friend. He's very brave and he likes to meet new people. Would you like to say hello?" In the observation deck, Ambassador Silthara's forked tongue had stopped moving entirely, a sign of extreme shock in her species. "The child is socializing with it." "That's not the most disturbing part," said Professor Quindell, his massive brain pulsing with rapid calculations. "Look at the creature's body language. The positioning of its heads, the relaxation in its musculature, the reduced thermal output from its breath chambers. It's exhibiting curiosity responses." General Vexthar's claws scraped against the viewing window. "Kiraxes the Destroyer doesn't get curious. He destroys. It's literally in his name." Below them, Emma had moved even closer to the dragon, now standing within easy reach of any of his 6 massive limbs. She held Mr. Peanuts up toward Kirax's primary head, moving the stuffed animal in a small waving motion. "See? He's saying hello," Emma explained to the dragon, her voice filled with the kind of patient instruction she usually reserved for teaching her younger cousin how to play games. "Mr. Peanuts is very good at making friends. He taught me that if you're nice to people, they'll usually be nice back." Kiraxes lowered his head further, bringing his snout within inches of the tiny stuffed elephant. His nostrils flared as he took in the scent of the toy, and, for a terrifying moment, it seemed as though he might simply bite down and end both the elephant and the child in one swift motion. Instead, he exhaled very gently, a warm breath that ruffled Emma's hair and caused her to giggle. That tickles, she said, reaching up to pat the side of his snout with her free hand. You're very warm. Do all dragons feel like this? The collective intake of breath from the observation deck was audible throughout the ship. In the history of galactic civilization, no one had ever voluntarily touched Kirax's and lived to tell about it. Captain Mitchell's hand was now firmly gripping her emergency beacon, but something held her back from activating it. Emma looked completely at ease, chatting with the galaxy's most feared predator as if they were old friends meeting for lunch. Mom always says that everyone feels better when they have a friend, Emma continued, settling down cross-legged on the floor in front of the dragon. She placed Mr. Peanuts in her lap and reached for her juice box. Would you like to sit with me? The floor is pretty comfortable. What happened next would be debated by xenobiologists for generations to come. Kiraxes, who had never shown deference to any being in his long and violent life, slowly lowered his massive body to the floor of the containment bay. His movements were careful and deliberate, ensuring that no part of his enormous form came too close to the tiny human. His three heads arranged themselves in a semicircle around Emma, close enough to observe her every movement but positioned in a way that seemed almost protective. Much better, Emma said approvingly, taking a sip of her juice. See? Everything's more fun when you have friends to share it with. High Counselor Thanewas moved closer to the viewing window, his crystalline form resonating with frequencies that indicated deep contemplation. In all my centuries of study, I have never witnessed behavior like this. The child has somehow activated pack bonding protocols in a creature that was believed to be incapable of forming social attachments. How is this possible? Demanded Counselor Melvin, her wings beating so rapidly they were creating small whirlwinds near the ceiling. Our best psychologists have tried for months to find some way to communicate with the creature. The humans send a child with snacks? Captain Mitchell finally found her voice. That's not just any child, she said quietly. Emma was selected for this mission specifically because of her psychological profile. She scores off the charts for empathy and social intelligence. Our xenopsychologists theorized that if anyone could make peaceful contact with Kiraxes, it would be someone who sees potential friends everywhere she looks. You used a child as an experimental subject? General Vextar's voice carried the kind of outrage that in his species typically preceded violent action. We asked for volunteers, Dr. Chen interjected quickly. Emma volunteered immediately when we explained that we needed someone to try to make friends with a lonely dragon. Her parents gave permission only after extensive psychological evaluation and safety briefings. Below them, Emma had opened her container of apple slices and was methodically placing them in a small line between herself and the dragon's heads. I thought you might want to try different pieces, she explained to Kiraxes. Sometimes the ones from the middle taste sweeter than the ones from the edges. The dragon's right head moved forward and delicately picked up one of the apple slices, his massive jaws handling the tiny morsel with the precision of a master chef. His left head soon followed, and then, his primary head, each one sampling the offering with an almost ceremonial care. Emma watched with delight, clapping her hands together. Oh good. You do like them. I was worried they might not be the kind of food dragons eat. She reached into her lunchbox again and pulled out the handful of colorful candies. These are jelly beans, she announced. They're my favorite because they come in so many different flavors. Would you like to try one? Ambassador Zethkara's bioluminescent patterns had now shifted to colors that in his species indicated complete bewilderment. She's conducting a feeding ritual. An informal pack bonding ceremony. Impossible, breathed Professor Quindell. Kirax's species abandoned pack behaviors millions of years ago. They're apex solitary predators. Apparently no one told Emma that, said Captain Mitchell, and, despite the impossible danger her young compatriot was in, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Emma selected a red jelly bean and held it up toward Kirax's primary head. This one tastes like cherry. It's really good. She placed it carefully on his extended tongue, then selected a green one. And this one is apple-flavored, kind of like the fruit but sweeter. The dragon accepted each offering with the same careful precision, his massive form remaining perfectly still except for the gentle movements of his heads. With each taste, his eyes seemed to grow brighter, but not with the harsh fire of before. This was something warmer, more curious. Mr. Peanuts, Emma said, picking up her stuffed elephant and addressing him directly, I think our new friend likes the candy. Should we share our sandwich too? She held the elephant up to her ear as if listening to a whispered response, then nodded seriously. Mr. Peanuts says that peanut butter and jelly is the best sandwich in the whole universe, but he thinks our friend might be too big for just one sandwich. We might need to ask Captain Mitchell if she brought extra food. In the observation deck, the implications of what they were witnessing began to sink in. This wasn't just first contact between a human child and a dangerous alien predator. This was a complete redefinition of what they thought they knew about interspecies communication. She's treating him like a person, whispered Ambassador Silthera, her serpentine features displaying an expression that in her species indicated profound revelation. Not like a monster or a weapon or a specimen to be studied. Like a person who might be lonely and hungry and in need of a friend. High Counselor Thanewa's crystalline form began to resonate with harmonics that conveyed deep respect. Perhaps, he said slowly, we have been approaching the question of interspecies relations from entirely the wrong direction. Emma had finished distributing her jelly beans and was now unwrapping her sandwich. She carefully separated it into 6 equal pieces, arranging them in a neat pattern on a napkin from her lunchbox. I know this probably isn't very much food for someone as big as you, she said to Kiraxis, but Mom always says it's not about how much you share, it's about sharing what you have. And, right now, this is what I have. The dragon's 3 heads moved in unison, lowering until they were level with the napkin. For a moment, the entire observation deck held its collective breath, waiting to see what would happen when the galaxy's most feared predator encountered a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Kirax's primary head moved forward first, his massive nostrils flaring as he took in the unfamiliar scent. Then, with movements so gentle they seemed impossible given his size, he picked up one of the sandwich pieces and placed it carefully in his mouth. Emma watched expectantly, her hands clasped together in anticipation. Do you like it? She asked hopefully. The dragon chewed slowly, thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving Emma's face. When he swallowed, something extraordinary happened. A sound rumbled from deep within his massive chest, a low, rhythmic vibration that none of the observers had ever heard before. Is he purring? Asked General Vexthar, his reptilian features displaying the kind of confusion that came from witnessing something that contradicted everything he thought he knew about the universe. Dr. Chen was frantically checking his instruments. The acoustics match recorded purring behaviors from various mammalian species, but Kirax's anatomy shouldn't be capable of producing those sounds. Emma, however, seemed to understand perfectly. She beamed at the dragon and clapped her hands together in delight. Oh, you do like it. I'm so happy. Mr. Peanuts, did you hear that? Our new friend likes peanut butter and jelly. She held her stuffed elephant up again, pressing her ear against its fabric head as if receiving another whispered message. After a moment, she nodded seriously and looked back at Kiraxis. Mr. Peanuts wants to know if you'd like to be our friend, she said with the kind of earnest sincerity that only children could muster. We don't have very many friends who are dragons, so it would be really special. The observation deck fell into absolute silence. This was the moment that would determine whether they were witnessing a miraculous breakthrough in interspecies relations or about to watch a tragedy unfold in real time. Kirax's 3 heads moved in a complex pattern, first looking at Emma, then at the stuffed elephant, then at the remaining sandwich pieces. His massive body shifted slightly, and, for a heart-stopping moment, it seemed as though he might be preparing to strike. Instead, he lowered his primary head and very gently touched his snout to Mr. Peanut's fabric trunk. Emma's face lit up with a joy so pure and radiant that it seemed to illuminate the entire containment bay. He said yes, she exclaimed, hugging Mr. Peanuts tightly to her chest. He wants to be our friend. And, in that moment, as a 7-year-old human child celebrated making friends with the most dangerous predator in known space, every being in the observation deck understood that they were witnessing something that would change the galaxy forever. The age of fear was ending. The age of friendship had begun. 3 hours had passed since Emma Rodriguez had first entered the containment bay, and the observation deck of the Eternal Vigilance had transformed into an impromptu conference center. Representatives from dozens of worlds huddled in small groups, speaking in hushed tones about what they had witnessed. Emergency protocols had been quietly suspended, replaced by a kind of watchful amazement that none of them had experienced before. Below them, Emma and Kiraxis had settled into what could only be described as a companionable silence. The dragon had arranged himself in a protective circle around the child, his 3 heads taking turns watching her as she worked on what appeared to be an art project. She had produced a collection of colorful papers and crayons from her backpack and was busy creating drawings while humming a cheerful tune that the ship's acoustic systems were having trouble categorizing. Status report, Captain Mitchell said into her communicator, though she hadn't taken her eyes off Emma since the miraculous first contact had begun. All readings are stable, came the voice of Dr. Chun from the science bay. Kirax's stress indicators are at the lowest levels we've ever recorded. Brain activity suggests a state of relaxed alertness similar to what we might see in a domesticated animal interacting with a trusted companion. Did you just call the most feared predator in the galaxy a domesticated animal? Asked Ambassador Zeth Kara, his forearms gesticulating in what his species considered extreme agitation. I'm simply reporting the data, Dr. Chen replied calmly. Whatever is happening down there, it's unlike anything in our xenobiological databases. Emma held up one of her drawings toward Kirax's primary head, displaying a colorful crayon illustration that depicted a large dragon and a small human figure standing together under a bright yellow sun. Look! I drew us being friends, she announced proudly. Do you like it? The dragon's massive head moved closer to examine the artwork, his enormous eye focusing on the simple but heartfelt illustration. After a moment of careful study, he made that strange purring sound again, a deep rumble that seemed to resonate through the entire ship. Emma giggled and set the drawing aside, immediately starting work on another. I'm going to make one for Captain Mitchell too, so she can remember our adventure. And maybe one for Mr. Peanuts to keep in his special box at home. High Counselor Thanewas approached Captain Mitchell, his crystalline form chiming softly with harmonics of curiosity. Captain, I must ask, was this outcome predicted by your xenopsychologists? Captain Mitchell shook her head slowly. Honestly? Our best-case scenario was that Emma might be able to approach Kiraxis without triggering an aggressive response. We hoped she could demonstrate that humans aren't a threat. This. She gestured toward the scene below, where Emma was now showing Kiraxis how to properly hold a crayon in his claws. This is beyond our wildest expectations. The dragon was attempting to mimic Emma's drawing motions, his massive talons gripping the tiny crayon with surprising delicacy. The result was a series of bold, sweeping lines across the paper that looked more like abstract art than anything recognizable, but Emma clapped enthusiastically at each attempt. Very good, she encouraged him. You're getting better at it. Art is supposed to be fun, so it doesn't matter if it looks perfect. Professor Quindal's massive brain pulsed with rapid calculations as he observed the interaction. The creature is exhibiting learning behaviors. Complex social learning. It's adapting its motor functions to engage in a purely recreational activity with no survival benefit. Maybe that's the point, said Dr. Chen's voice through the communicator. Maybe what we've been missing is that survival isn't the only motivation for intelligent behavior. Ambassador Silthara's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air for emotional pheromones. What she detected made her serpentine features shift into an expression of wonder. The child's emotional output is extraordinary. She's producing biochemical markers for pure joy, contentment, and affection. And, somehow, the dragon is responding to those emotional cues. Emma had moved on to her third drawing, this one apparently depicting the entire observation deck filled with various alien figures. She held it up for the assembled dignitaries to see, waving cheerfully at the viewing window. I drew all of you too, she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the communication system. You're all part of our friendship now. The impact of those simple words rippled through the observation deck like a shock wave. For most of the assembled beings, the concept of interspecies friendship was a theoretical construct discussed in diplomatic protocols and cultural exchange programs. To watch it happening naturally, spontaneously, between a human child and the galaxy's most feared predator, was redefining everything they thought they knew about the nature of consciousness and connection. General Vexthar's claws tapped nervously against the viewing window. This changes everything, he muttered in his native language, though the universal translators made his words accessible to everyone present. If peaceful contact is possible with Kiraxis, then our entire approach to first contact protocols needs to be reconsidered. The military implications alone are staggering, added Counselor Melvin, her gossamer wings creating small eddies in the air around her. Kiraxis has been considered the ultimate weapon, a force of nature that could be contained but never controlled. If the humans have found a way to establish communication and cooperation. It's not about control, Captain Mitchell interrupted firmly. Emma isn't trying to control Kiraxis. She's trying to understand him. Below them, Emma had finished her third drawing and was now rummaging through her backpack again. She produced a small mirror decorated with cartoon characters and held it up for Kiraxis to see. "This is what I look like," she explained, positioning the mirror so he could see her reflection. "And this is what you look like." She angled the mirror toward his primary head, allowing him to see his own massive features reflected in the small surface. Kiraxis studied his reflection with the same intense focus he had given everything else Emma had shown him. His other two heads moved closer, examining themselves from different angles. The sight of a 50-meter dragon discovering his own reflection would have been comical under other circumstances, but there was something deeply profound about watching a being encounter self-awareness through the innocent guidance of a child. "Now we've both seen ourselves," Emma announced, putting the mirror away. "That's important for friends, don't you think? You have to know who you are before you can know other people." Dr. Chen's voice crackled through the communicator with barely contained excitement. Did anyone else catch the philosophical implications of what she just said? She's introducing concepts of self-awareness and identity as foundational elements of friendship. The child is conducting an advanced course in consciousness theory, Professor Quindal observed, his massive cranium pulsing with rapid thought processes. Spontaneously. Without training. She's operating on pure intuitive understanding of social psychology. Emma had pulled out what appeared to be a small photo album from her backpack and was flipping through pages filled with pictures. "These are my friends and family back on Earth," she told Kiraxis, holding the album where he could see the images. "This is my mom and dad, and this is my little brother Tommy. He's only 4, so he's not old enough for space adventures yet." She turned the page, revealing more photos. "This is my dog Buster, and this is my cat Princess Whiskers. They don't get along very well, but they both love me, so they try to be nice to each other when I'm around." Kiraxis' 3 heads moved in complex patterns as he studied each photograph, his massive eyes taking in the details of Emma's life on Earth. When she showed him a picture of herself at what appeared to be a birthday party, surrounded by other human children, he made a sound that was distinctly different from his previous purring. This was higher-pitched, almost questioning. "Oh, that was my birthday last month," Emma explained, apparently understanding his inquiry perfectly. "I turned 7. All my friends came over and we played games and ate cake. It was really fun." She looked thoughtful for a moment, then brightened considerably. "You know what? When we get back to Earth, maybe you could come to my next birthday party. I bet my friends would love to meet a real dragon." The observation deck fell into stunned silence. The casual way Emma had just invited the galaxy's most dangerous predator to a children's birthday party was beyond anything any of them could have imagined. "She's planning future social interactions with him," whispered Ambassador Zethkara, his bioluminescent patterns flickering rapidly. "Long-term friendship building. And he's responding positively to the concept," added Dr. Chen. "Look at his body language. He's actually considering the invitation." Indeed, Kiraxis seemed to be processing the idea seriously, his 3 heads moving in what appeared to be a complex decision-making pattern. Finally, he lowered his primary head until it was level with Emma's face and made a soft sound that could only be interpreted as agreement. Emma's face lit up with pure delight. "Really? You'd want to come to my birthday party? Oh, that's wonderful. I'll have to ask Mom to make a really big cake." High Counselor Thainwis' crystalline form began to resonate with frequencies that indicated profound contemplation. "Are we witnessing the formation of an interspecies alliance based on birthday party invitations?" "I've seen diplomatic negotiations that were less effective than this conversation," admitted Counselor Melvin. Emma had moved on to showing Kiraxis other items from her backpack, a small music box that played a tinkling melody, a collection of smooth stones she had gathered from a beach, and a pressed flower that she had saved from her grandmother's garden. "My grandma gave me this before she went to heaven," Emma explained, holding the delicate pressed flower carefully. "She said that beautiful things last forever if you take care of them. I think friendship is like that too." The dragon's massive head moved closer to examine the preserved flower, his enormous eyes studying the delicate petals with surprising gentleness. When Emma held it up for him to smell, he breathed in very softly, his nostrils barely moving to avoid damaging the fragile memento. "You're being so gentle," Emma observed approvingly. "I can tell you understand that some things are special and need to be treated carefully." Dr. Chen's voice came through the communicator with a note of wonder. "Emotional intelligence. He's demonstrating sophisticated emotional intelligence." the ability to recognize and respond appropriately to the emotional significance of objects and memories. This is reshaping our understanding of dragon psychology, Professor Quindal added. We assumed their intelligence was primarily focused on hunting and territorial behaviors. But this suggests cognitive capabilities comparable to advanced civilized species. Emma carefully put the pressed flower away and reached for her lunchbox again. She pulled out a small container filled with what appeared to be cookies. I almost forgot about dessert, she announced. Mom packed chocolate chip cookies. They're homemade. She opened the container and the sweet aroma filled the containment bay. Would you like to try one? They're really good. Kirax's three heads moved in unison, focusing on the small cookies with the same intense attention he had given everything else Emma had offered. She selected one cookie and held it up toward his primary head. These are special because Mom made them just for this trip, she explained. She wanted to make sure I had something from home to share with new friends. The dragon accepted the cookie with the same careful precision he had shown with all of Emma's offerings. As he chewed, his eyes seemed to grow even brighter, and the purring sound returned, deeper and more contented than before. Oh good, you like Mom's cookies. Emma clapped her hands together in delight. She'll be so happy when I tell her. She always worries that her cooking might not be good enough for important occasions. General Vexthar's reptilian features displayed what his species considered profound confusion. The child is conducting cultural exchange through maternal baking. And it's working better than formal diplomatic protocols, Captain Mitchell observed with a mixture of pride and amazement. Emma settled back against her stuffed elephant, apparently completely comfortable in the presence of the massive dragon. You know what, she said thoughtfully. I think grown-ups sometimes make things too complicated. They have all these rules about how to talk to new people and what you're supposed to say and not say. She gestured vaguely toward the observation deck. But I think the most important thing is just being nice and sharing what you have. Everyone likes to feel welcome, right? Kirax's middle head moved closer to Emma, studying her with an expression that somehow conveyed understanding. He made a soft sound, almost conversational in tone. Exactly. Emma nodded as if he had spoken clearly. It doesn't matter if you're big or small or have scales or fur or anything else. Friends are friends. The simplicity and profundity of her statement resonated through the observation deck like a philosophical revelation. Here was a 7-year-old human child articulating the fundamental principles of peaceful coexistence with more clarity than centuries of diplomatic theory. She's right, said High Counselor Thane Wyss, his crystalline form chiming with harmonics of recognition. We have constructed elaborate protocols and procedures around first contact situations, but perhaps the answer was always much simpler than we imagined. Emma yawned widely, the excitement and activity of the day beginning to catch up with her. I'm getting a little sleepy, she announced. Do you mind if I rest for a bit? We can keep talking afterward. Kiraxes immediately adjusted his position, arranging his massive body to create an even more protective circle around Emma. His heads positioned themselves as natural pillows, and he began making a soft, rhythmic humming sound that seemed designed to be soothing. Emma smiled gratefully and curled up against his warm scales, using Mr. Peanuts as a pillow. Thank you, she said drowsily. You're a very good friend. Within minutes, she was fast asleep, completely trusting and safe in the protection of the galaxy's most feared predator. The observation deck watched in absolute silence as Kiraxes maintained his vigil, his massive form perfectly still except for the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. His three heads took turns watching Emma sleep, ensuring that nothing could disturb her rest. In all my years of military service, General Vexthar said quietly, I have never seen a more effective demonstration of trust and protection. Captain Mitchell wiped away a tear she hadn't realized had formed. Emma always said she wanted to make friends with everyone in the galaxy. I guess she meant it literally. As the ship continued its journey through the stars, carrying its impossible cargo of new friendship toward destinations unknown, every being present understood that they had witnessed something extraordinary. A child's simple desire to share cookies and kindness had accomplished what entire fleets and diplomatic corps had failed to achieve. The age of understanding had truly begun. Emma awoke to the gentle sound of Kirax's humming, a deep melodic vibration that seemed to resonate through her entire body. For a moment, she lay still with her eyes closed, feeling safer and more peaceful than she could ever remember. The warm scales beneath her cheek felt like the world's most comfortable pillow, and Mr. Peanuts was tucked securely in her arms. "Good morning," she said softly, opening her eyes to find all three of Kirax's heads watching her with gentle attention. "Did you sleep too, or do dragons not need to sleep?" Kirax's primary head tilted slightly, and he made a questioning sound that somehow conveyed curiosity about her rest. "Oh, I slept wonderfully," Emma assured him, sitting up and stretching. "That was the best nap ever. You're very good at making comfortable sleeping places." In the observation deck above, the overnight shift of dignitaries and scientists had been joined by even more representatives as word of the unprecedented contact had spread throughout the Galactic Council fleet. The viewing area was now crowded with beings from every corner of known space, all eager to witness the continuing development of this impossible friendship. Captain Mitchell had remained at her post through the night, alternating between monitoring Emma's vital signs and coordinating with Earth Command about the extraordinary situation. Every few hours, she received increasingly urgent communications from various government agencies wanting detailed reports, but she found herself reluctant to reduce what she was witnessing to mere data points and tactical assessments. "Status report from the overnight watch," Dr. Chen's voice came through the communicator, though he sounded like he hadn't slept at all. Both subjects maintained stable vital signs throughout the rest period. Most remarkably, Kirax's brain activity showed patterns consistent with REM sleep cycles during the time the child was sleeping, despite the fact that his species was believed to be incapable of entering restorative sleep states. Professor Quindal's massive cranium pulsed with fascination. He's adapting his biological rhythms to match hers. The implications for dragon physiology are staggering. Emma had retrieved her toothbrush and a small cup from her backpack and was conducting what appeared to be her normal morning routine, using water from a dispenser that had been installed in the containment bay. She brushed her teeth methodically, humming the same cheerful tune she had been working on the day before. "Good morning hygiene is very important," she explained to Kiraxes as she rinsed her mouth. "My dentist says if you take care of your teeth, they'll take care of you." "Do dragons brush their teeth?" Kiraxes opened his massive jaws, displaying rows of teeth that gleamed like polished obsidian in the containment bay's lighting. Each tooth was the size of a sword blade, sharp enough to slice through titanium, and coated with a natural enamel that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Emma studied his dental architecture with the same serious attention she gave to all new discoveries. "Wow, your teeth are really beautiful," she said admiringly. "They look like they're made of starlight. I bet they never get cavities." She reached into her backpack again and produced a small bottle of mouthwash. "Would you like to try some of this? It makes your mouth feel fresh and minty." The idea of offering mouthwash to the galaxy's most dangerous predator was so absurd that several observers in the viewing deck made choking sounds of disbelief. But Kiraxes examined the small bottle with the same careful attention he had given all of Emma's offerings. "Just a tiny bit," Emma instructed, pouring a small amount into her cup. "You swish it around and, then, spit it out. It's kind of fun, actually." What followed was perhaps the most surreal sight in the history of interspecies relations, a 50-meter dragon carefully following a 7-year-old girl's instructions on proper oral hygiene. Kiraxes managed the process with surprising grace, though the sound of him spitting out the mouthwash was like a small geyser erupting. "Perfect," Emma applauded. "Now doesn't that feel better?" Kiraxes made a pleased rumbling sound and licked his lips experimentally, apparently enjoying the minty sensation. High Counselor Thanewi's crystalline form resonated with harmonics of profound amazement. "Are we documenting the first recorded instance of interspecies dental care?" "More importantly," added Ambassador Zethkara, "the creature is allowing the child to introduce completely alien substances into his mouth. The level of trust required for that behavior is unprecedented." Emma had moved on to combing her hair, using a small mirror to ensure her braids were neat and tidy. As she worked, she chatted conversationally with Kiraxes about her morning routine. "Mom always says that how you start your day affects how the whole day goes," she explained, readying her blue ribbons with practiced precision. "If you take time to take care of yourself, you feel better about everything else." She paused in her grooming and looked thoughtfully at Kiraxes' massive form. "You know, I bet nobody's ever taken care of you like this before. Being in cages and being studied and things like that probably isn't very nice." Kirax's three heads moved in complex patterns that somehow conveyed both acknowledgement and a kind of resigned sadness. For the first time since the contact had begun, his eyes dimmed slightly, reflecting something that looked remarkably like melancholy. Emma immediately noticed the change in his demeanor. With the emotional intelligence that had made her perfect for this mission, she set down her comb and moved closer to his primary head. "Hey," she said gently, reaching out to touch his snout with both hands. "It's okay. I know it's been hard. But you're not alone anymore. You have friends now." The gesture was so tender, so purely compassionate, that several beings in the observation deck had to look away. The sight of a human child offering comfort to a creature that had terrorized entire star systems was almost too profound to process. Kirax's eyes brightened again at her touch, and he made a soft sound that was unmistakably grateful. He pressed his snout gently against her hands, being careful not to overwhelm her with his massive size. "That's better," Emma said with satisfaction. "Friends help each other feel better when they're sad. That's one of the most important rules of friendship." Dr. Chen's voice crackled through the communicator with barely contained excitement. "Did everyone see that emotional regulation response?" The child identified distress signals and provided appropriate comfort, and the dragon responded with measurable psychological improvement. "She's conducting therapy," Professor Quindal observed, his massive brain pulsing with rapid calculations. "Instinctive psychological therapy based on pure empathetic response." Emma had returned to her backpack and was pulling out what appeared to be a small tablet device. "I brought something special to show you today," she announced to Kiraxes. "It's pictures and videos from Earth. I thought you might like to see where I live." She activated the tablet, and the screen filled with images of Earth's landscapes: rolling green hills, vast blue oceans, snow-capped mountains, and forests filled with sunlight filtering through leaves. Kirax's three heads moved closer to examine the device, his enormous eyes reflecting the colors and light from the small screen. "This is my planet," Emma explained, swiping through the images. "It's really beautiful. There are lots of different places to live and explore. This is a forest near my house where I like to go hiking with my dad." The image showed a peaceful woodland trail dappled with sunlight, completely unlike the sterile containment bay where Kiraxes had been imprisoned. His heads moved in patterns that suggested longing, a desire for something he had never experienced. "And this," Emma continued, switching to a video, "is the ocean. It's huge and full of life, and it changes colors depending on the weather." The video showed waves crashing against a sandy beach, with seabirds wheeling through a bright blue sky. The sound of the surf filled the containment bay, and Kiraxes made a sound of wonder at the rhythmic noise of the water. "Would you like to see the ocean someday?" Emma asked. "I think you'd like it. There's lots of room to fly and swim, and the water is warm in some places." The casual way she spoke about future adventures together, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for a dragon to visit Earth's beaches, sent ripples of shock through the observation deck. "She's inviting him to Earth," whispered Ambassador Silthera, her serpentine features displaying extreme agitation. "The security implications alone." "Wait," Captain Mitchell said firmly. "Let's see where this goes." Emma had switched to a video of children playing in a park, their laughter echoing through the containment bay's speakers. Kiraxes watched with intense fascination as the small humans ran and climbed and engaged in elaborate games that seemed to have no purpose beyond pure joy. "These are kids like me," Emma explained. "We like to play and explore and learn new things. Sometimes we get scared or sad, but mostly we try to have fun and be kind to each other." She paused the video on an image of children sharing ice cream, their faces bright with happiness and sticky with chocolate. "I bet if they met you, they'd want to be friends too. Once they got over being surprised about how big you are." Kiraxes studied the image of the laughing children, his massive form seeming to radiate a kind of wistful curiosity. He made a questioning sound, tilting his head in a way that clearly asked for more information. "Oh, you want to know more about playing?" Emma interpreted correctly. "Well, playing is when you do things just because they're fun. Like this." She stood up and began demonstrating various playground games, hopping on one foot, spinning in circles with her arms outstretched, and playing an elaborate version of patty cake with Mr. Peanuts. Her movements were graceful and joyful, and her laughter filled the containment bay like music. Kiraxes watched her demonstrations with the same focused attention he had given everything else, but this time there was something different in his expression. This wasn't just curiosity or hunger or even affection. This was something closer to yearning. "Would you like to try?" Emma asked, slightly breathless from her spinning demonstration. Playing is more fun when you do it with friends. What happened next would be debated in xenobiological circles for decades to come. Kiraxes, who had spent his entire existence as an engine of destruction, tentatively lifted one of his massive front legs and attempted to mimic Emma's hopping motion. The result was a earth-shaking thud that rattled the entire ship, but Emma clapped enthusiastically anyway. "That's great," she encouraged. "You're really strong. Maybe we should try something that doesn't involve jumping." She thought for a moment, then her face brightened with inspiration. "Oh, I know. Let's play a singing game. I'll sing a song, and you can hum along if you want to." Emma cleared her throat and began singing a simple children's song about friendship and adventures. Her clear, sweet voice filled the containment bay, and, after a few verses, Kiraxes began to add his deep humming to the melody. The combination of the child's pure soprano and the dragon's resonant bass created a harmony that was unlike anything anyone had ever heard. In the observation deck, beings who had spent their lives studying the complexities of interspecies relations found themselves wiping away tears as they listened to the impossible duet. "They're making music together," said Counselor Melvin, her gossamer wings beating in time with the rhythm. Spontaneous artistic collaboration between species separated by millions of years of evolution. When the song ended, Emma applauded both herself and Kiraxes. "That was beautiful. You have a really good singing voice. We should definitely do that again." Kiraxes preened slightly at the compliment, his massive form somehow managing to convey pleased embarrassment. He made a soft questioning sound, and Emma immediately understood. "You want to hear more songs?" "Of course. I know lots of them." She settled back against his warm scales and began singing a lullaby her grandmother had taught her, a gentle melody about stars and dreams and finding your way home. As her voice filled the space with its peaceful cadences, Kiraxes' breathing began to match the rhythm of the song. His three heads moved in slow, hypnotic patterns, and the bioluminescent patches along his scales that no one had noticed before began to pulse gently in time with the music. "My goodness," breathed Dr. Chen. "He's displaying synchronized bioluminescence. We had no idea his species was capable of that level of aesthetic response." The lullaby seemed to have a profoundly calming effect on both Emma and Kiraxes. When she finished singing, the containment bay fell into a peaceful silence that felt more like companionable meditation than the absence of sound. "Thank you for singing with me," Emma said softly. "Music is one of the best ways to share feelings, don't you think? Even when you can't use the same words, you can still understand each other through songs." High Counselor Thanewa's crystalline form began resonating with complex harmonics that conveyed deep contemplation. "The child has identified one of the fundamental principles of universal communication. Emotional expression through organized sound transcends linguistic barriers." Emma yawned and snuggled closer to Kiraxes' warm scales. "I'm so glad we're friends," she said drowsily. "This is the best adventure I've ever had." As she drifted toward another nap, surrounded by the protective presence of her massive companion, every being in the observation deck understood that they were witnessing the birth of a new era in galactic civilization. The universe had just become a much smaller, and much more connected, place. Emma woke from her second nap to find that something had changed in the containment bay. The lighting had been dimmed to a softer, warmer glow, and she could hear the distant sound of many voices speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Kiraxes was still maintaining his protective circle around her, but all three of his heads were now alert and facing toward the observation deck above. "What's happening?" Emma asked, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. She followed Kiraxes' gaze upward and was surprised to see that the viewing window was now crowded with many more alien faces than had been there before. "Oh my! Did more people come to meet us?" Captain Mitchell's voice came through the communication system, though it carried a tension that hadn't been there earlier. "Emma, sweetheart, we have some visitors who've heard about your friendship with Kiraxes. They'd like to meet both of you. Would that be okay?" Emma looked thoughtfully at Kiraxes, who had lowered his primary head to her level. "What do you think?" she asked him seriously. "Do you want to meet more new people?" Kiraxes made a sound that was part purr, part questioning rumble. Emma nodded as if she had received a clear answer. "He says he's a little nervous because he's not used to meeting lots of people at once," Emma interpreted for the benefit of the observers. "But he's willing to try if I'm there with him." High Counselor Thanewa's crystalline form chimed with approval. The child is serving as an emotional interpreter and support system, facilitating social integration through trusted mediation. What Emma couldn't see from her position was the heated debate that had been raging in the observation deck for the past several hours. Word of the successful first contact had spread throughout the Galactic Council fleet with incredible speed, and representatives from species that had never shown interest in diplomatic matters were demanding access to witness the phenomenon firsthand. More concerning were the urgent communications that had begun arriving from various military commands, scientific institutions, and political bodies throughout the galaxy. Everyone wanted to study Kiraxes, to understand how a creature of such destructive capability had been tamed by a human child. Some wanted to replicate the process for military applications. Others wanted to study the neurological mechanisms involved. A few had even suggested that Emma herself should be studied to determine what made her so uniquely effective at interspecies communication. Captain Mitchell had firmly refused all such requests, but the pressure was mounting. Emma and Kiraxes had become the most important beings in known space, whether they realized it or not. Before we introduce any new people, Captain Mitchell said carefully, I want to make sure both of you are comfortable and ready. Emma, can you tell me how you're feeling about everything that's happened? Emma considered the question with the same serious attention she gave to all important matters. I feel really happy, she said finally. Kiraxes is the best friend I've ever made, and I love learning about how dragons think and feel. But... She paused, her young face showing a wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. I think some of the grown-ups are getting too excited about us being friends. They're starting to act like we're a science experiment instead of just people who like each other. The accuracy of her assessment sent a chill through the observation deck. Several of the assembled dignitaries shifted uncomfortably, realizing that the child had identified the exact problem they had been debating for hours. You're very wise, Emma, Captain Mitchell said gently. What would make you and Kiraxes feel most comfortable about meeting new people? Emma looked up at Kiraxes, who had been listening to the entire conversation with obvious understanding. I think we should only meet people who want to be friends, not people who want to study us or use us for things. Friends are different from scientists. Professor Quindal's massive brain pulsed with what in his species indicated embarrassment. The child had drawn a distinction that the entire academic community had failed to consider. That's perfectly reasonable, Captain Mitchell agreed. Let's start with just one or two new friends, okay? People who are here because they're genuinely interested in friendship. Emma nodded and stood up, smoothing down her yellow dress and checking to make sure Mr. Peanuts was securely tucked in her arm. Okay, but before we meet anyone new, I want to do something special with Kiraxes first. She had been thinking about this moment since she first woke up, turning an idea over in her mind the way she might examine a particularly interesting shell on the beach. It was something that felt important, though she couldn't quite explain why. Kiraxes, she said, looking up into his massive primary head's eyes. I know that everyone is excited about us being friends, and I know that some people think it's really unusual or special or scientific. But I want you to know that for me, you're not unusual or special because you're a dragon. You're special because you're you. Kiraxes' three heads moved in complex patterns that somehow conveyed both confusion and deep attention. Emma smiled at his response. What I mean is, when I look at you, I don't see the galaxy's most dangerous predator or an important specimen or anything like that. I just see Kiraxes, who likes apple slices and chocolate chip cookies and singing songs and making art with crayons. I see someone who's been lonely for a very long time and who has the biggest, kindest heart in the universe. The observation deck had fallen into absolute silence. Emma's words were being translated into dozens of languages and broadcast throughout the fleet, but their impact transcended mere communication. This was a 7-year-old human child articulating the fundamental principle of dignity that formed the basis of all enlightened civilization. And, because you're my friend, Emma continued, and, because I want everyone to know how much I care about you, I want to give you something that friends give each other when they really, truly care. She stood on her tiptoes and gestured for Kiraxes to lower his primary head to her level. Puzzled but trusting, the massive dragon complied, bringing his enormous head down until his snout was just inches from Emma's face. This is called a kiss, Emma explained softly. It's how humans show love and friendship and appreciation for people who are important to us. And then, as billions of beings throughout the galaxy watched in absolute astonishment, Emma Rodriguez rose up on her toes and gently kissed the snout of the most feared predator in known space. The kiss lasted only a moment, a soft touch of human lips against dragon scales, but its impact was immediate and profound. Kiraxes' eyes blazed with an inner light that had nothing to do with predatory fire and everything to do with pure, overwhelming emotion. The bioluminescent patches along his scales erupted in patterns of color that swept across his massive form like aurora dancing across a living constellation. A sound emerged from deep within Kirax's chest, unlike anything he had ever produced before. It was musical and complex, part purr, part song, part something entirely new. The frequency resonated through the ship's hull and beyond, carrying across the electromagnetic spectrum in patterns that the ship's sensors couldn't fully analyze. But Emma understood it perfectly. "You're welcome," she said, reaching up to pat his snout affectionately. "I love you too." The observation deck erupted into chaos. Representatives from dozens of species were talking simultaneously, their voices creating a cacophony of amazement, disbelief, and heated debate. Some were demanding immediate evacuation protocols. Others were calling for emergency scientific analysis. A few were simply staring in slack-jawed wonder at what they had witnessed. High Counselor Thainw's crystalline form was resonating with harmonics so complex that the universal translators couldn't keep up. General Vexthar was clutching the viewing window with all his claws, his reptilian features displaying an expression of shock that bordered on religious revelation. Ambassador Zethkara's bioluminescent patterns were cycling through colors that didn't have names in most languages. But Captain Mitchell was focused entirely on Emma and Kirax's. The dragon had wrapped all three of his heads around the child in a gesture that was unmistakably protective, loving, and grateful. Emma was giggling as the gentle embrace tickled her, completely unaware that she had just redefined the possibilities of interspecies relations. "Status report," Captain Mitchell said into her communicator, though her voice was hoarse with emotion. Dr. Chen's response came back immediately, though he sounded like he was struggling to process what his instruments were telling him. "Captain, I'm reading neurological changes in Kirax's that are unprecedented. His brain activity is showing patterns we've never seen before in any species. It's as if entire new neural pathways have activated simultaneously." "And the child?" Captain Mitchell asked. "Completely stable. Normal heart rate, normal brain activity, normal stress indicators. For her, this is just Tuesday." Professor Quindal had managed to recover enough to contribute to the analysis. "The emotional resonance between them is measurable on our instruments. They've formed what can only be described as an empathic bond. The dragon is experiencing emotions that his species may never have evolved to feel. Evolution in real time," breathed Counselor Melvin. "We're watching consciousness itself expand beyond its original boundaries." Emma had extracted herself from Kirax's gentle embrace and was looking around at all the commotion in the observation deck. "Are they okay up there?" she asked, concerned. "They seem really excited." "They're fine," Captain Mitchell assured her. "They're just amazed by what they witnessed. You've shown them something they've never seen before." "But it's just a kiss," Emma said, puzzled by all the fuss. "People kiss each other all the time when they love each other. It's not weird or scientific or anything. It's just normal." And, with those words, Emma Rodriguez had articulated something that would reshape galactic civilization, the revolutionary idea that love and friendship between different species wasn't a scientific phenomenon to be studied or a diplomatic tool to be manipulated, but simply a normal part of caring about each other. Kiraxis had been listening to this entire exchange with obvious understanding, and now he made a sound that was clearly directed at the observation deck. It wasn't aggressive or threatening, but it was firm and unmistakably communicative. "What is he saying?" asked Ambassador Silphara. Emma looked up at her friend's three heads, then back at the viewing window. "He's saying that he wants to meet the new people now, but only if they understand that we're friends first and everything else second. He doesn't want to be treated like a monster or a weapon or a science project anymore." The dragons' heads moved in unison, clearly confirming Emma's interpretation. "He also says," Emma continued, "that anyone who wants to be friends with him has to be friends with me too, because we're a team now. And..." She paused, listening to another series of sounds from Kirax's. "And he says that if anyone tries to hurt me or take me away from him, they'll discover exactly why he has the reputation he has." The temperature in the containment bay rose noticeably as Kirax's eyes blazed with protective fire. For a moment, the galaxy's most feared predator was visible beneath the gentle friend Emma had discovered, and the message was unmistakable: the dragon would protect the child with every fiber of his being. But Emma just patted his snout affectionately, and the fire in his eyes immediately softened back to warm affection. "Don't worry," she told him. "Captain Mitchell and all the people here are good people. They're not going to hurt me. But, I'm glad you want to protect me. That's what friends do for each other. High Counselor Thainwis moved closer to the viewing window, his crystalline form chiming with respectful harmonics. Young Emma, he said formally, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I want to assure both you and Kiraxes that your friendship will be protected and honored. We have learned more about the nature of consciousness and connection in the past few days than in centuries of formal study. Emma smiled up at him. Thank you, Mr. Thainwis. That's very nice of you to say. The formal way she addressed him, with perfect pronunciation of his complex name, sent ripples of surprise through the observation deck. Emma had been paying attention to everything, learning and remembering with the remarkable adaptability that made humans such effective ambassadors. Now, Emma continued, would someone like to come down and meet Kiraxes properly? I think he'd like to show people that he can be gentle and kind when he's treated with respect and friendship. As representatives from across the galaxy began the careful process of deciding who would have the honor of being formally introduced to the universe's newest and most unlikely friendship, everyone present understood that this moment would be remembered as the turning point when the galaxy became a smaller, warmer, and infinitely more hopeful place. The age of fear was ending. The age of understanding was beginning. And it had all started with a kiss. 6 months later, the Terran embassy on the neutral world of Haven's Rest was bustling with activity that would have been unimaginable before Emma Rodriguez kissed a dragon and changed the galaxy forever. The building itself had been hastily redesigned to accommodate visitors of all sizes, from the microscopic quantum dancers to being so large they existed partially in other dimensions. But the most remarkable modification was the massive garden courtyard at the center of the complex, where Kiraxes spent his days in what could only be described as contentment. The space was open to the sky, filled with flowering plants from dozens of worlds, and equipped with comfortable resting areas scaled for everything from human children to 50-meter dragons. Emma sat cross-legged in her favorite spot beneath a earth oak tree that had been specially transported and cultivated for the garden. She was working on her homework, a tablet displaying lessons that now included Introduction to Galactic Cultures and Elementary Universal Ethics alongside traditional subjects like mathematics and reading. Kirax's primary head rested nearby, close enough that Emma could easily reach over and pet his snout while she worked. His other two heads were positioned to watch the various entrances to the garden, a habit he had developed to ensure no one could approach his young friend without his knowledge. Kiraxes, Emma said, looking up from her tablet, Mrs. Patterson wants me to write an essay about my best friend for school. Can I write about you? The dragon's response was a pleased rumble that had become as familiar to embassy staff as the sound of air recycling systems. Over the months since their first meeting, Emma had developed an intuitive understanding of Kirax's complex communication methods, and she now served as his primary translator for formal diplomatic occasions. What should I tell them about you? Emma mused, tapping her stylus against her lips thoughtfully. I could talk about how you're really good at helping me reach high places, or how you always know when I'm sad and need hugs, or how you learned to play chess even though the pieces are really tiny for your claws. Ambassador Chen, who had been promoted to head the new Department of Interspecies Friendship following the success of Emma's mission, approached the pair with a warm smile. Over the months, he had learned to read Kirax's body language well enough to know when the dragon was receptive to visitors. Good afternoon, Emma, Kiraxes, he said, bowing slightly to both of them. The gesture of respect toward the dragon had become standard protocol throughout the embassy. How are your lessons going? Really well. Emma replied brightly. I'm learning about quantum mathematics, and Kiraxes is helping me understand how spacetime works. It turns out dragons have a really good instinct for multidimensional physics. This was one of many discoveries that had emerged from the ongoing friendship. Kirax's species, it turned out, navigated through hyperspace not through technology but through an innate understanding of cosmic geometry that far exceeded most civilizations' scientific knowledge. He had been helping human physicists solve equations that had puzzled them for decades, not through formal mathematics but through what Emma described as feeling where the universe wants to bend. That's wonderful, Ambassador Chen said. I actually came to let you know that we have some special visitors today. Do you remember Ambassador Silphira from the Serpentine Confederacy? Emma nodded enthusiastically. She was one of the first people to visit us after I kissed Kiraxes. She's really nice, and she brings those sparkly fruit things that taste like starlight. Well, she's brought her daughter today. A young serpentine named Zissera who's about your age. She's been very eager to meet both of you. Kiraxes lifted all three heads with interest. In the months since becoming the galaxy's unofficial ambassador for friendship, he had discovered a particular fondness for meeting young beings from different species. Children, he had learned, approached him with curiosity rather than fear, and their natural openness made communication much easier.
That sounds great,
Emma said, closing her tablet and standing up.
Should we go meet her, or would she like to come to the garden?
Actually, Ambassador Chen said with a mysterious smile, I think she'd prefer to come here. She's a little nervous about meeting a dragon, so Ambassador Silthara thought the garden might be more comfortable. A few minutes later, Ambassador Silthara entered the courtyard followed by a much smaller figure who was clearly trying to project confidence while simultaneously hiding behind her mother's robes. Young Zisera was about Emma's size but, with the distinctive serpentine features of her species, scales that shifted from deep green to bright blue depending on the light, large golden eyes, and a forked tongue that flickered nervously as she took in the massive form of Kiraxes.
Emma immediately recognized the signs of first-contact nervousness.
She had seen the same expressions on dozens of young beings who had visited the embassy over the past months.
Hi! Emma called out cheerfully, waving from her spot beneath the oak tree. I'm Emma, and this is Kiraxes. We're really excited to meet you.
Kiraxes, who had become quite sophisticated in his understanding of diplomatic etiquette, lowered his head in a formal greeting that acknowledged both Ambassador Silthara's rank and her daughter's youth. Zisera's golden eyes went wide as she took in the full size of the dragon, but Emma's presence seemed to reassure her. If a human child could sit comfortably next to such a massive creature, perhaps it wasn't as dangerous as the stories suggested.
Hello, Zisera said in carefully practiced universal standard. My mother says you and the dragon are friends. Real friends.
The best of friends, Emma confirmed, reaching over to pat Kiraxes' snout affectionately.
Would you like to come sit with us?
Kiraxes is really gentle, and he loves meeting new people.
Ambassador Silthara gave her daughter an encouraging nod. Remember what we discussed, little star. Judge by actions, not by reputation.
With the careful bravery that children summon when facing their fears, Zisera approached Emma and Kiraxes. Her serpentine movements,